Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I met Anya in business school. It wasn't in a lecture hall or at some crowded mixer. It was in a small, underlit study room, huddled around a table with two other people, trying to dissect a case study that felt impossibly dense. She was studying organizational psychology, and from the very start, she stood out. It wasn't because she was loud. She wasn't. She was the opposite of loud. But she had this presence, a stillness that made you lean in. When she spoke, every word felt chosen, deliberate, perceptive. She could read the dynamics of a room in minutes, articulating things the rest of us were only vaguely feeling. I remember thinking, even then, that her intelligence was a kind of art. You could exchange just a few sentences with her, and days later, you'd still be thinking about the way she framed a question. I was immediately charmed. Our first group project together sealed it. The rest of us were throwing ideas at the wall, loud and eager to impress. Anya just listened. She would nod slowly, her eyes focused, and when she finally spoke, it cut through all the noise. She'd offer a firm opinion, backed by an observation so sharp it felt like a revelation. To me, that kind of intelligence bordered on a force of nature. It was captivating. We started as colleagues. Then, friends. We'd stay late in the library, not just studying, but talking. Really talking. About our childhoods, our fears, our wild, improbable dreams for the future. Before either of us even realized it was happening, we were inseparable. We walked to class together. We crammed for exams side by side, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared sense of panic. We talked about the future with that breathless excitement you only have when you feel like the entire world is waiting for you to conquer it. The romance. It wasn't a lightning strike. It was more like the sun rising. Slow, inevitable, and warming everything it touched. It developed so naturally there was never a need for grand declarations or dramatic confessions. We just knew. We understood each other with quiet looks across a crowded room, with inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. Anya was my biggest champion. Every crazy idea I had, from the half-baked app projects I abandoned after a week, to the one that finally stuck the plan for a health tech startup, she supported it, unconditionally. She encouraged me when I was drowning in self-doubt. When I was ready to give up, she was the one who would look me in the eye and say, "No, not yet. You're closer than you think." So when we graduated, the decision to get married felt less like a question and more like the next logical step. It felt obvious. We were already a partnership in every sense of the word. We were just making it official. The wedding was simple. A small ceremony in a public garden, organized with the help of a few close friends. There were no luxuries, no grand displays, just emotion, raw and real. With our diplomas in hand, and the new title of husband weighing strangely and wonderfully on my tongue, I dove headfirst into the startup world. Those first few years were tough. Brutally tough. I worked freelance, taking on small system development projects just to keep the lights on. Sometimes, the money was barely enough for the basics. Rent, groceries. But Anya always found a way. She eased the burden without ever making me feel like a failure. She worked part-time at a psychology clinic and took on freelance clients online. On top of that, she ran our tiny apartment with an impeccable, quiet efficiency that I took completely for granted. Even with so little, we had our rituals. We made special dinners on Sundays, a small extravagance that felt like a feast. And we had a rule. No matter how bad the day went, no matter how tense or tired we were, we slept wrapped up in each other's arms. It was a promise. A physical reminder that we were a team. We had 2 years like that. 2 years of grinding. I kept pushing an idea that few people understood, a system that I believed could change how small clinics stored and accessed patient data. I knocked on so many doors. I received countless rejections. I heard the jokes, the criticism, the well-meaning advice to just give up and get a stable job. But Anya never wavered. Whenever I considered changing fields, whenever the weight of it all felt too heavy, she would be there. "This is just a phase, Ethan," she'd say, her voice calm and certain. "Success is just a matter of time. You can't abandon the one thing that makes you this passionate." She said those words with such conviction, such absolute faith, that I felt ridiculous for ever doubting myself. Her belief became my own. And then, everything began to change. It was during a meeting with an anonymous investor, hastily arranged by an acquaintance. I walked in expecting another rejection, But something was different that day. Maybe it was Anya's words from the night before, still ringing in my ears. I presented the project with a new energy. I spoke clearly. I dominated the proposal. And for the first time, I think, I projected the one thing I'd been lacking: unshakable confidence. The investor asked for a week to evaluate. That week was torture. But Anya kept me sane. She prepared a special dinner, one of our Sunday feasts on a Tuesday, and told me that regardless of the answer, I had already won. I had won because I hadn't given up. When the email came through, when I saw the word approved, we just held each other in the middle of our tiny living room and cried like children. With the financial backing, everything accelerated. I built a small team. We rented a small office. Within months, our system was operational in 3 clinics. Then 10. By the time we reached 50, a larger corporation came knocking, offering a multi-million-dollar deal to acquire a part of our operation. I hesitated. It felt too soon. But Anya, ever the strategist, insisted it was the right move. This secures our future, Ethan, she argued. It gives us the capital to grow without risk. It opens up space for your next big idea. I listened. I always listened to her. And I agreed. The money changed everything. We bought a house. A modern, glass-walled house with a swimming pool that shimmered under the California Sunday. We bought an imported SUV, the kind I used to see in magazines. New furniture. Anya took charge of it all. She had a natural eye for design. She hired a personal organizer, took an interior design course online, and meticulously crafted our new house into a home that reflected, well, I thought it reflected us. We traveled. For the first time, we left the country. Paris, London, then Thailand. I took pictures of everything. I was living a dream, and I knew it. At dinners with new, wealthy friends, I would tell the story of our beginning. I'd speak with pride about the incredible woman by my side, the one who had been there when we had nothing but instant noodles and a shared dream. She would smile whenever she heard that, a soft, affectionate smile, and respond with loving words. On social media, we looked like a couple from a bank commercial. Young, successful, deeply in love. The perfect picture. But sometimes, when the light hit just right, or when there was a lull in the conversation, I'd notice Anya seemed a bit distant. A flicker of something in her eyes I couldn't name. I'd ask if everything was okay. She'd just smile and blame it on exhaustion, or the stress of all the changes. And I believed her. I ignored it. After all, everything was perfect. Our love had overcome poverty, time, and the skepticism of so many. What could possibly touch us now? That unwavering certainty, that absolute conviction that I was with the perfect woman. It kept me from seeing the subtle signs, the small, almost invisible cracks that were starting to form in the foundation of our life. I was blind with gratitude. I credited all of my success to her. I said it to her, to our friends, to journalists who interviewed me. Without Anya, I would say, my voice thick with emotion, I would be nothing. I would never have made it. And it was true. She had supported me when I needed it most. Her belief had been the wind in my sail. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that at the exact moment I was repeating those words with such pride, Anya was already shaping another version of our story. A version where her effort carried more weight than it actually did. A version where her support wasn't just encouragement, but the fundamental pillar of the entire enterprise. A version that, sooner or later, would be turned against me in the most unexpected and devastating way possible. Anya was different. It was clear to anyone who spent more than 15 minutes with her, if they were really looking. The smile she gave me when I hugged her no longer reached her eyes. She started avoiding direct questions about our future, deflecting with vague pleasantries. And the excuses to go out alone became more frequent. First, she said she needed time for herself to decompress from our new, hectic life. Later, she claimed she wanted to reconnect with old friends from her internship days. And me? Always respectful, always trusting Ethan, I encouraged it. Of course, I'd say, you deserve some time for yourself. You've earned it. Little did I know that during one of these reunions, Anya had crossed paths with Reese again. I didn't know him then. I only learned his name much later, a name that would become acid on my tongue. Reese had been a coworker of hers years earlier, when she was an intern at a small consulting firm. He was, by all accounts, charismatic, sharp talk, silent ambition. Back then, Their relationship had been purely professional, but Anya later admitted there was a latent tension between them, an unspoken current, barely disguised by compliments and subtle jokes. When she reconnected with him, what she felt wasn't nostalgia. It was something else. It was as if this reunion reignited a version of herself that had been dormant through years of our stable, loving marriage. A version I never knew existed. They met for coffee. At first, it was all very restrained. But Reese's gaze was calculated. He was a predator who knew how to wait. He talked about life, the paths they'd taken, and how different everything seemed now. Anya spoke about our marriage, but she used neutral words, as if describing the routine of a distant acquaintance. Reese saw the opening. He didn't need to push. He just had to be present. The second meeting, there were subtle compliments. The third, a prolonged touch on her hand as they said goodbye. By the time Anya realized what was happening, she was already caught in something she either couldn't, or didn't want to, stop. Anya was never impulsive. If she were, she might have just fallen into his arms in a moment of passion. But she was strategic, and with Reese, strategy became the language of their affair. He now worked in corporate law, specializing in asset protection and business restructuring. When she told him, perhaps boasting, perhaps testing him, just how much money I had made, Reese's eyes lit up with a specific kind of interest, one that mixed desire with cold, hard calculation. It was he who planted the idea. He framed it not as a dirty trick, but as an intelligent redistribution. Legal. Documented. Clean. He told her that with the right plan, the money we had built together could become hers. Anya resisted, at first, or so she claimed. There was still a trace of guilt, a faint voice inside reminding her of our years in the tiny apartment, of my all-night coding sessions, of everything we had built. But Reese had sharp arguments, and a way of speaking that turned doubts into decisions. You're not trying to take anything from him by force, Anya, he'd say, his voice smooth and reassuring. You're just securing what is rightfully yours. After all, without you, he wouldn't have gotten where he is. That phrase, that single, poisonous phrase, it broke the last barrier. She began to act. It started subtly. Comments dropped during dinners. She'd talk about the importance of protecting our assets against potential lawsuits, shareholder conflicts, or future economic crises. She'd mention that many successful couples put a portion of their assets in one person's name as a protective measure. It's common practice, she'd say casually. I heard it from an old colleague, and I, who trusted her blindly, who believed her intelligence in these matters far surpassed my own, I agreed without blinking. Of course, it made sense. I thought she was just being smart. I thought she was trying to help us. With Reese's guidance, hidden in the background, she prepared the documents. Suggestions for asset restructuring, account transfers, small contracts for ownership changes, all of it wrapped in dense legal jargon, filled with specific clauses I didn't understand, but presented under the banner of legality and prudence. My signature was just a detail. She would spread the papers on our marble kitchen island, point to the line, and hand me a pen. It's just some standard paperwork to shield the company, honey. And I, trusting that my wife understood these matters better, simply signed. Between my business trips and long days at the office, a significant part of our assets was already being transferred into Anya's sole name, and I had no idea of the extent. The second part of the plan was more delicate, the prenuptial agreement update. When we got married, we were just students. Our prenup was a basic template, drafted by a family lawyer we barely knew. But now, with a company, investments, and international holdings, Anya suggested an update. She framed it as a necessity. It would be prudent, Ethan, to avoid headaches if your company ever faces lawsuits. She even argued that we should each have our own lawyer for personal protection, to make everything appear fair and transparent. I thought it was fair. I thought it was responsible. I was so immersed in the company's success, in new business deals and interviews for magazines, that I didn't realize I was being led with surgical precision down a path of my own financial ruin. Reese stayed behind the scenes. He guided Anya with encrypted emails and self-destructing messages. They met in places where they could never be recognized. Their relationship was more tactical than romantic. There was passion, yes, but what united them was something far more powerful: ambition. While Anya infiltrated our finances and slowly undermined the structure of our marriage, Reese mapped out the legal strategies. They studied my behavior as if it were a clinical case. Every mistake I made was noted, Every confession of stress or frustration was recorded. Every impulsive business decision was turned into a useful piece on the chessboard they were building. Anya knew her limits. She kept the marriage functional on the outside. She smiled in photos. She organized events for my company. She wrote loving cards for my birthday. It was all part of the disguise. A masterful performance. At the same time, she was carefully nurturing a new narrative among our acquaintances. She would let slip that success had changed me, that I was distant, cold, more focused on numbers than on her. When I traveled for work, she used the opportunity to advance negotiations with Reese. During those moments, they drafted the next phase of their plan, calculating each step with a cold precision that chills me to the bone even now. In the eyes of the world, Anya remained the devoted, grateful wife. But inside, she no longer had any emotional connection to me. There were only goals, objectives, a destiny she was plotting alongside someone she saw as her equal in ambition. She wasn't just planning to run away with Reese. She was planning to leave big, rich, with everything documented, legalized, and completely out of reach of any challenge. She wasn't fleeing our marriage. She was converting it into profit. Anya's plan entered its most dangerous phase when she began to rewrite the history of our marriage, detail by detail, with one goal: generating evidence. Everything that had once seemed small and insignificant became a piece in a puzzle she manipulated with chilling precision. Arguments that used to resolve in minutes were now deliberately prolonged. Any sharp response from me, born of stress or exhaustion, was noted. On some occasions, she would subtly provoke me, asking ambiguous questions, seeking some harsh reaction, however brief, however insignificant. When I responded with impatience, she used it as an argument with her lawyer. Context didn't matter, only the record mattered. She began saving screenshots of out-of-context text messages. She made recordings of conversations where I sounded distant, my mind clearly on a business problem. She even took short videos on her phone, where I appeared absorbed in my laptop while she talked about something supposedly important. To any outsider, the narrative was clear. Anya was the neglected wife, ignored, someone fighting for attention in a hopelessly unbalanced relationship. And the more I focused on the business that was supposed to be our future, the more vulnerable I became. I trusted too much. I devoted my days to expanding the company, and my nights to a rest I believed I deserved, unaware that on the other side of the bed, a meticulous strategy was unfolding against me. Reese analyzed every document Anya sent him, every bank transaction she managed to obtain. They communicated at set times, always using an app with self-destructing messages. She left no traces, no saved history, no notes, no names mentioned aloud. When she needed to meet him, she told me she was attending networking events or visiting a sick friend, and I never questioned her. My trust was a gaping vulnerability, and they exploited it to its fullest. The final step was the divorce petition. When she felt she had gathered everything she needed, Anya began discussing the specific allegations with her lawyer. She would claim emotional exhaustion, invisibility within the marriage, a silent overload of domestic responsibility, lack of reciprocity. She would have witnesses, friends she had been feeding her narrative to for months. She would have records, she would have everything, and I had trust. Just that. Far, far too much trust. That night, she came home later than usual. I was in the living room, finishing a review of a contract, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the papers. She stood in the doorway for a few seconds, just watching me, before she spoke. "Ethan," she said, her voice strangely flat, "we need to talk." I put the papers down, a knot of worry tightening in my stomach. I asked if everything was okay. She took a deep breath, a rehearsed breath, and began with the sentence she had been practicing for weeks. "I feel like this marriage has transformed into something I no longer recognize." Zero. She said that despite everything we had lived through, she felt we were on different paths. She used words I never, ever expected to hear from her lips. Words like disconnected, and unseen, and empty. She avoided crying, because she knew tears would create room for doubt, for reconciliation. And she was long past the stage of doubts. I just sat there, trying to understand. My mind was racing, trying to pinpoint a moment, a reason. I asked if there was someone else. She said it was about her, an internal process. She avoided any direct confrontation. She said she needed this space, and that a divorce would be the best decision for both of us. I was silent for a long time. Then, Numbly, I said that if that's what she really wanted, I would respect it. I still believed it was temporary. A phase. I thought that maybe she'd change her mind, that with time, everything might work out. I still believed in us. I didn't know that while I slept that night, tossing and turning with a shattered heart, Anya had already sent the final files to her lawyer. She had everything ready. The petitions were prepared, the documents were organized, and the arguments were written, based on weeks of meticulous, cold-hearted collection. Less than 15 days later, I received the official notification. As I read the allegations, I felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if I were reading a fictional story about someone else's life. The woman I knew, the woman I had built my world around, had been replaced by a version I didn't recognize at all. Trying to react was like fighting a ghost. Every point I tried to question was already backed by her carefully curated evidence. The videos, the audio recordings, the financial documents I had so willingly signed, everything supported Anya's narrative. The judge reviewed the case. It seemed clear-cut. He cited emotional imbalance, prolonged wear and tear on the relationship, and a lack of active contribution from me in maintaining our domestic life. The ruling was a death blow. Anya walked away with more than half of everything. The accounts, the properties, the investments, even future profits from the company were partially compromised. I spent days in a state of shock. The amount of money lost was staggering. But what hurt the most, what truly broke me, was knowing that it had all been done legally, without yelling, without scandals, without blackmail. It was a silent, precise execution, backed by documents I had signed myself, and carried out by the one person in the world I thought I could trust. I lost the house, the assets, and a part of the company I had spent years building from nothing. But what weighed most heavily was the emptiness, the crushing feeling of being betrayed not by an enemy, but by someone in whom I had placed my entire history, my entire future. The news began to circulate, cautiously at first, but it soon reached the ears of friends and colleagues. Many found my silence strange. I refused to talk about it. I only continued showing up for mandatory commitments with a distant, hollow look in my eyes. I was alive, but a part of me had stayed back there, in that cold and calculated legal process, and the other part was now consumed by a new, burning question that wouldn't leave me in peace. Where was Anya? Weeks went by. I had no sign of life from her. If before, my routine was driven by goals and deadlines, now it was guided by silence and disbelief. I closed the curtains in the new, smaller apartment I had rented. I avoided phone calls. I only left the house for absolute essentials. My days felt crumpled, repetitive, and gray. I ate out of obligation and pretended to work just to avoid being fully consumed by a thick, suffocating apathy. The few friends who tried to approach me were met with short answers and a lost gaze. The man who had built a company from scratch could no longer fill out a simple form without feeling utterly defeated. Anya's betrayal had pierced through every layer of what I believed was solid and real. My own judgment, my memories, my love for her. It was all poison now. One day, while drinking stale coffee with my eyes fixed on the blank laptop screen, I received a notification. An online economic newspaper. The headline read, "Tech entrepreneur targeted in alleged multi-million-dollar divorce fraud." It was about me. The article briefly recounted the case, without mentioning all the details, but it was enough to intrigue a lawyer in another city. A lawyer specializing in patrimonial crimes and international law. His name was Marcus Thorne. Respected in legal circles, he was known for taking on impossible cases and for his firm, unyielding performance in international courts. After finishing the article, Marcus sensed something was profoundly wrong with how everything had unfolded. The speed, the precision, the legality of it all felt too perfect. He sent me a direct email. It was simple, professional, and offered to help, without upfront costs, until he could understand what was really behind the process. I was suspicious. My trust in humanity was at an absolute zero. I thought it might be some kind of scam, or a trap set by Anya to finish me off. But Marcus didn't push. He just left his contact information and said that if I ever wanted to talk, he'd be available. Almost a week later, in a moment of sheer desperation, I called him. The conversation lasted over 2 hours. I told him everything, down to the smallest, most humiliating detail, the way she held the pen for me, the casual tone in her voice when she talked about asset protection, the manufactured arguments, all of it. Marcus listened in complete silence. I could hear the faint scratching of a pen on paper. He jotted down information, cross-referencing data in his head, asking pointed, incisive questions. When I was finally finished, my voice raw, he was quiet for a moment. Then he simply said, "Mr. Hayes, you were intelligently manipulated. But they were arrogant, and arrogance creates flaws in any plan. I can see where." And it was at that moment, for the first time in months, I felt a faint internal reaction. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was close. Marcus entered the case with the same focus he would use in a major international dispute. He began by reviewing every single asset movement made in the past 2 years. He studied the divorce documents with a fine-tooth comb. He analyzed bank records. He cross-checked information with shell companies registered abroad, and he found it. The crucial mistake. In their arrogance, trying to hide a portion of the money even from the courts, Anya and Reese had transferred funds to accounts in the names of individuals who were already under investigation for money laundering in other cases. One of those names was on an Interpol monitoring list. It was the crack in their perfect facade. It was the breach he needed. With this evidence, Marcus activated international justice. He initiated a case for capital flight, patrimonial fraud, and conspiracy. The case gained traction with shocking speed. It was clear that the transfers made by Anya and Reese were designed to circumvent the legal system. Several were inconsistent with the declared origin of the funds, and the companies used to move the money. They didn't exist. They were just fronts, paper tigers. Meanwhile, something inside me began to shift. The apathy started to recede, replaced by a cold, quiet fire. I went back to work. I used the pain as fuel. I created a new project, born directly from my own trauma, a system focused on asset protection in marital relationships and legal restructuring for small businesses. I designed a new digital system that offered solutions for asset shielding and risk analysis in marital contracts. The project grew quickly, supported by investors who believed not only in the system's potential, but in the story of the man who had created it. 2 years after Marcus's first email, justice responded. Anya and Reese were located in a small, picturesque country in Europe, living off my money. They were summoned to testify. With the support of international courts, they were detained to face the charges. The news spread like wildfire through the media. Business and law websites commented on the incredible turnaround, holding it up as an exemplary case of how legality can be used to cover coldly calculated plots. And how, with the right help, it can also pave the way for true justice. I attended the hearing. I watched Anya enter the room, accompanied by 2 foreign lawyers. She looked thinner, tired, but she still maintained a certain air of detached superiority. When our eyes met across the courtroom, for just a second, she hesitated. I saw a flicker of the woman I once knew, or thought I knew, before it was swallowed by the cold mask she wore now. I said nothing. I just observed. Reese tried to justify the transfers with a web of legal jargon, but the documents gathered by Marcus were irrefutable. Cold, hard facts. The court ordered the immediate freezing of their assets and the restitution of the embezzled funds. More than 2/3 of the original amount was recovered. At the end of it all, as I was leaving the courthouse, a reporter shoved a microphone in my face. "Mr. Hayes," she asked breathlessly, "after all of this, will you ever forgive her?" I was silent for a few seconds, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar. I thought of the tiny apartment, the Sunday dinners, the unwavering belief in her eyes that had once been my entire world, and I thought of the cold, calculated betrayal that had followed. Then I looked straight into the camera. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," I said, my voice steady. "It's understanding that moving forward is more powerful than looking back." And as the camera focused on my face, I knew my story was being heard by thousands, a story that served as both a warning and a reminder that no matter how deeply trust is broken, justice, sometimes, can still find a way to surprise you. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.